joining us tonight. This is the second of our nights of recitations. I was saying last night that I remember when we started doing recitations nights at the Crow's Nest, which was one of our original locations here in St. John's. And recitations are one of those things that are a deep part of the culture here in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's something that people really love. And it's great to see it experiencing a little bit of a revival. It never really went away, and it's certainly been something that has been featured at most of our festivals, if not all of our festivals, and it's been a part of other festivals and folk festivals, the Newfoundland and Labrador Folk Festival, for many, many years. Last night we had a really great conversation about kind of nostalgic memories of people having to learn recitations and perform recitations in concerts and things like that. Tonight you're getting a bit of a treat. We have three gentlemen with us who are part of that revitalization movement, keeping recitation alive and taking it forward into the next century. We have three people who are joining us. They all have a flair for fantasy and humor. Whether you're following Ralph the Flying Hound through the skies or riding a skidoo into outer space, Dave Paddon's recitations are sure to make you smirk. And Ken Parsons, who will be our first performer, is a magician-turned-storyteller who brings us tales from the fictional town of Raisin Arm that you might need to see to believe. Dave Penny will finish off our night bringing harrowing humor of the everyday with his unique and hilarious musical recitations. Politics, traditions, magic, and mystery feature into all our tales tonight. And of course, every single word they will tell you is true. So to start off, we're going to start off with Ken. Ken, I'm going to bring you up and get you going here. Take it away.
Lovely. Thank you, sir. Thank you. What a great introduction. Yes, guys, I tell stories about a little town out in Bonavista Vista Bay called Raisin Arm. And we'll start with, well, one of those stories. Of all the cooks in Newfoundland, and she had tried the very best, young Evelyn down in Raisin Arm, well, preferred Mom's cooking best. She loved Mom's Sunday dinner, and I can say that guaranteed. And she couldn't wait to clean her plate, but she didn't like green peas. Well, to say she didn't like them, well, is a statement incomplete. Actually, she hated them, the worst thing that you could eat. I'm so happy that I hate them, and I really must admit, if I liked them, I'd have to eat them, and I don't like green peas one bit. But now she never told her mother how she hated those green peas, because she figured out a system to keep her mother pleased. When Sunday dinner rolled around, and although she was only 8, well, she'd hide them in her pocket when Mom put them on her plate. But you see, this worked against her, because Mom was keeping score. And when she saw that plate was empty, she just gave her more. And as fast as Evelyn took those peas and dropped them out of view, her mother smiled and gave her more and said, "No, good for you." She'd hide them under napkins, tried to give some to the cat. But when Fluffy had a whiff of peas, she was having none of that. Mom would dump them fresh, right on her plate. And Evelyn, like the rocket, she'd pretend to eat them and then whip them in her pocket. But Butter figured out what was going on, and she said, "Now, Evelyn, please, you get to have bread pudding if you'll eat just one green pea." Well, bread pudding on the menu, that worked like a charm. Not often there's bread pudding now down in Raisin Arm, and it was Evelyn's favorite food, her mostest, bestest treat. Maybe I would give peas a try if one is all I had to eat. Well, she picked a pea up with her fingers, and she figured this was it. She slowly put it in her mouth and let it sit on her tongue a bit. And her mother leaned right forward, maybe 45 degrees, and everyone at supper wondered, would Evelyn like green peas? And then she slowly closed her mouth, and her head cocked to one side. And her mother said, "Oh, Evelyn, dear, aren't you happy that you tried?" And then Evelyn did something that even she never thought she'd do. She looked her mother in the eye, and she turned a sickly blue, actually more a sickly green, like some weird, strange disease, and forced herself to swallow. "I don't like green peas." Mom said, "You got to get your vitamins, and I won't let dessert go spoil. But before you has bread pudding, here, take this cod liver oil." So the moral of this story, so you don't get one of these, don't ever try to fool your mom, and, well, always eat your peas. I don't use that big. Let me put this away. And let's try another one. Let's see. Yes. I don't know if people like to go moose hunting or not. My brother-in-law told me one time a story about when he was out moose hunting, so I turned it into a recitation. Here we go. He knows if he could, if he hunts in the woods, there's no creature that he couldn't reach. With his trusty argo and his big gun in tow, he's the king of the moose of Morley Peach. Now, men and beasts have crossed paths, for good or for bad, since the beginning of this world's creation. But I'll tell you the story and the redemption and glory of, well, King Morley Peach's coronation. See, Morley went out to see if either moose was about that he could shoot and bring home for a meal. But what he found was, well, something different, because it would be the moose that would get the good deal. So as his argo would push and make a path through the bush, Morley took care as he drove. But boys, what a shock when she brought up on a rock and was damaged, perhaps can't be sold. So he climbed out the back, left that big gun on the rack, and he proceeded to navigate round the pond. But the path, it got slicker, and, well, the bush, it got thicker, so, well, he whistled just to keep himself calm. And he kept up that tune as he went around that lagoon, and then he heard another whistler ring out. Well, Morley just laughed. It was probably his better half, there to guide him back out to the house. But then a strange thing. He heard a third whistler sing with a tone that was 2 octaves higher. And as the three went along, it was a wonderful song, like a heavenly whistling choir. His friends whistled poorly, but compared to old Morley, his musical skills were that good. But now there's 3 perfect ringers, now 4 wonderful singers, serenading all around in the woods. Well, Morley thought it was fun since this whistling begun, with all the harmonies that they could produce. But as he pushed through the alders, he met the Rock of Gibraltar and came face to nose with a moose. Well, Morley just froze. I would too, I suppose, with a beast of that size in your route. It was too slippery to run, and he didn't have either gun, well, not since his argo give out. So what could he do? And where's his whistling crew? And what were this moose's intentions? So like a steam whistle on ships, he puckered his lips, and when he whistled to try to get some attention. Shh, shh. Well, then out of the woods, 2 more giant moose stood. Would this trio of creatures attack? And to his ears and his eyes, it was a shock and surprise when those 3 giant moose whistled back. Well, there in that path, Morley smiled, and then he laughed, and then he whistled like he did before. And those 3 giants with racks, they whistled right back, and then motioned to follow along shore. You know, those 3 creatures pushed and made a path through the bush so that Morley would come to no harm. As the 4 went along, it was a wonderful song, and it went down the hills right to Raisin Arm. And when they got to a clearing, well, Morley Peach got his bearings, and he could make out his house down the shore. But then he realized, for his new friends to survive, well, those moose couldn't follow no more. See, it doesn't matter your size when there's a gun in your eyes, so Morley knew what had to be done. Because that was the day he threw his bullets away, because, well, a moose can't be friends with a gun. And when he turned back to the thistle, he could hear his friends whistle. And it was there that they crowned him their king. And this king with his crown, he turned right around, and the 4 of them, man, could they sing. The townspeople say it was the devil that day that ruined moose hunting for good. But when it's moose hunting season, well, Morley Peach, he's the reason that there's ne'er a sign of moose in the woods. And on clear Raisin Arm nights, if the moon is just right, you'd swear angels sing down from the skies. But that heavenly sound that comforts that town, well, that's just Morley in the woods with the boys. My wife's favorite story. And I'll finish up, we'll do one more. And I know Dale last night mentioned a mayor who made that joke, and that was Don. And this story is actually about Don's mother, about Nan London. And it's completely true. Yeah, sure. Newfoundland, Labrador are those kind of places where people come to escape and, well, give up their races. But not long ago now, we did have one spot where no one escaped nothing, and a battle was fought. See, down Raisin Arm, when provisions are scanty, nobody's allowed in Nan London's pantry. Well, now the pantry is open. It's not locked anymore, but I will tell you the story about what happened before. It was Nan's old orange tomcat. Now he's dearly departed, but he is the reason these shenanigans started. Just a roundabout tomcat, every bay has the same. Nan loved that old cat, but, well, never gave him a name. He just did what he wanted. He came in and went out. The kind of a cat that's got the run of the house. Now, this is not some spry creature like some fit mountain climber. No, he was more like a potato or a sofa recliner. And he's not a fast feline who can slither and slinker. He's more of the type that's a sitter and thinker. And Nan kept that cat food up high on the shelf, and there's no way that cat could get it himself. But one afternoon now he wanted a snack, and it was just Purity products on that lower rack. Well, he ate a whole bag, or maybe two, of hard bread, and that's when he got that Purity taste in his head. So from that day on forward, if his heart was beating, well, it was just Purity products was all he was eating. Nan went for cream crackers, for when company comes. And she went into the pantry and, oh, it's not a one. And she couldn't make any of her own fish and brews because there was nary a bit of hard bread around for to use. So as stuff started to vanish, oh, Nan got right vicious. First her hard bread, then her jams, and then her own candy kisses. Well, Nan had enough. She put on a bolt and a lock. But a roundabout tomcat is not easily stopped. The very next day, that old catty entry, he Houdini'd his way into Nan London's pantry. And to make matters worse, just to be a tormentor, he went through every jam and licked the jam from the centers. So Nan turned that pantry into an impenetrable vault. She made sure that cat's antics would be brought to a halt. She had bolts and big chains from ceiling to floor, and if you looked down, you could make out she built a secret trap door and a dirty big padlock. And if you don't know the code, well, the Bombay door's open and down you go. See, to protect her provisions, she'd take on any man. Those Japanese ninjas got nothing on Nan. It's mission impossible for crackers. That's the description I'd use. But now we're not talking about some feline Tom Cruise. No, that cat just sat bawling. And boys, what a sin. That constant meowing, because he couldn't break in. But poor Nan was poisoned. She let out a roar, and that cat shuddered and shook and fell dead to the floor. I wish you were gone. Well, she didn't mean that, and it wasn't her plan to make away with the cat. But the old cat had died. He had passed with the fright. Poor Nan felt so bad, she took all the locks off that night. See that vault that she created around all of her food? Had killed her poor cat now and ruined her mood. And she went to bed early. Her cheeks were all wet, and she cried as she slept over the loss of that pet. And the very next day, sure, something looked odd. Sure, it looked like the pantry door was abroad. Yes, so it was. Nan had been robbed. The shelves were all empty. Who would do such a job? They ate every cracker, every cookie and crumb, and they chewed every candy with the butter and rum. They drank all the syrup, they ate all the jam. Who down the arm would do this to Nan? Poor Nan was in shock. Sure, what now could she eat? But who's that on the daybed, covered in crumbs, half asleep? Sure as her old orange tomcatcher, he was alive. See, to get into that pantry, he faked his demise. Well, Nan wasn't angry. She was one happy missus. She didn't care if the cat ate the cream crackers or kisses. She was just glad now to see her old friend, and those purity biscuits, well, she'd get more again. But boys, what a story. All the newspapers read, Raisin Arm tomcat, fakes being dead. And up at Purity Factories, the boss, Mr. Pratt, well, he sent out a truck full of goodies when he heard about that. Oh, and Ned was so pleased. And with the cat's recent fame, she decided it was time to give that old cat a name. She christened him Nobody. Not because affections were scanty, but now nobody's allowed in Nan London's pantry. Thanks very much, guys. Have a great
awesome
evening.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much.
Perfect.
Ken Parsons there. And next up, we've got Dave Paddon for us tonight. No stranger to those of you who are familiar with recitations in Newfoundland. Dave?
Hi, everybody. Yes, nice to be here. And I got a couple of stories for you here tonight. Well, I can't see anybody now. Hang on a second. There we go. I wasn't too sure what to do. I'm going to do a funny one, and I'm going to do one that's not so funny. It's sort of sentimental, I guess. And I got the idea from listening to Benny, my friend Benny Powell, last night. Benny and I are both from Labrador, and the other thing we have in common is that we both flew for a living. We both flew various aircraft on the coast of Labrador, including the marvelous Twin Otter, which some of you may be familiar with. We both just retired in the last few years from about 40 years each flying, and now we're doing this. And this is more fun, although we both really enjoyed flying. I'd like to tell you a little story from, well, I put it in the year 1962. I would have been 6, and Benny would have been about the same. So this didn't happen to us, but there are times in every bush pilot's life that, you know, they wish they hadn't got out of bed that day. So this is such a story. It's a story of judgment, I suppose. It's called Christmas Flight. And you have to imagine yourself as a young pilot, maybe, you know, in the 60s, living in Goose Bay, Labrador, and on Christmas Eve, you get a phone call. I'll say my own name. Dave, we've got a bunch of freight to go up to Nain, 200 miles, and the weather's terrible, and they don't need it until after Christmas. Well, that's an easy one. I won't go. I'll wait till after Christmas. Say you have a young family there, and they're all excited around the Christmas tree and everything. And 10 minutes later, you get a call, Dave, somebody's seriously injured in Nain and needs to be medevaced out. Same weather, miserable, but it's a different scenario. Well, here's something sort of in between, and you can ask yourself, maybe if you've been in this position, whether you would have done the trip or not. It's called Christmas Flight. It was Christmas, 1962, on the northern Labrador coast. The winter's hardships were nothing new. This one was worse than most. The steamer's crew almost got in, but finally lost the bet. With heavy ice, you take your chance, and plans are overset. And the steamer carries most with which a northerner endures, so not much grub upon the shelves at the hungry belly stores. But there's little fear, with lots of deer and partridge in the country. What haunts them now is another want, another kind of empty. For the basics weren't the only thing aboard the mailboat, but a steamer's not the only way to keep young hopes afloat. And who's the loving mom or dad who'd ever want to see the innocence and sadness with no gifts beneath the tree? And so the desperate call went out from the northern town of Nain to the airline down in Goose Bay town. Could presents come by plane? But the storm had raged for 6 long days and not a plane had flown as the pilot stepped into the cold and left the warmth of home. 'Twas -35 and black as pitch at 6 a.m. The forecast called for some improvement as the day went on. Arriving at the hangar, daylight showing in the east, ceiling at 1,000 feet, viz. 2 miles at least. 600 horses came to life in a cloud of oily smoke, and as the engine warmed, the pilot knew he carried every hope of girls and boys for Christmas toys in the cabin of his plane, while anxious parents paced the floors in every house in name. But then he thought about his own, his wife and sons and daughter, the family picture clipped upon the panel of the Otter. With the weather bad, the doubts he had about the flight had grown. Would joy for families up in Maine bring heartbreak to his own? For judgment's not an easy thing, and hopes are hard to weigh. And he wondered if he'd do this flight on any other day. 2 hours north, 2 hours back, this Christmas Eve for sure. As he lifted off in threatening skies, his doubts grew ever more. The northbound flight went well enough beneath the sullen cloud, and as he read his map upon his knee, he thought his thoughts out loud. 200 miles with not a sign of humankind to show. How small a speck am I upon this shield of ice and snow. He landed in a whiteout in the harbour ice in Maine, and as he shut the engine down, he thought he heard the strain of woodwind, brass, and strings drifting softly from the land. 'Twas Handel's Great Messiah from the Inuit brass band. The willing hands of the Nunimut helped unload the plane. The anxious pilot took on fuel, then took off again. With the weather bad, he knew the southbound flight would be no lark. The days are short that time of year. Soon it would be dark. With the cloud base at 1,000 feet, he knew he'd get no higher. And he thought about his loving wife at home beside the fire. The excitement of his children as they gathered round the tree, waited for their father to come home this Christmas Eve. The snow was light at first, visibility not bad, but it came down thick and it came down quick. 2 miles was all he had. Descending to 500 feet to keep the ground in sight, as time ticked by, he realized he soon would lose the light. And he knew the ridge lay right ahead, right past Witch Doctor Lake. And as he read his map in the gathering dusk, he knew just one mistake could end his life in the rock and ice that towered above his plane. With viz now down to half a mile, he searched the ground in vain. Then all at once the ground was gone. He was swallowed by the snow. He'd had his chance to run for Postville back a while ago. And his fear rose up in the back of his throat. He cursed himself a fool. And he prayed to the man for a guiding hand past the ridge so hard and cruel. I guess the minutes seem like hours when each one could be your last. Your universe a small cockpit with lighting softly cast. The engine seems to speak to you, its voice so calm and steady. Carolyn, Catherine, Noel, Eddie. Carolyn, Catherine, Noel, Eddie. Then in the swirling snow, a sudden shadow on the right. Another to the left of him, both quickly lost to sight. And then the snow began to thin, and he thought that he could make a tree line out beneath his wings or the shoreline round a lake. The weather cleared as quickly as it had closed not long ago, and with daylight fading in the west, the stars began to show. And as he hung suspended over the frozen, silent land, he offered up a prayer of thanks and considered the guiding hand. He had no recollection of the last part of the flight, the landing or the drive back home that frosty northern night. He knelt before his children and embraced them tenderly, kissed his wife and held her close beside the Christmas tree. And as he lay in bed that night, before he went to sleep, he thought about how close he'd come to the unseen ridge so steep, and the choices that a man can make, and who has the final say. Just a sec. And whether the wheel goes up or down on any given day. For judgment's not an easy thing, and hopes are hard to weigh. No, judgment's not an easy thing, and hopes are hard to weigh. Thank you. So I'll dedicate that to some of my flying friends, most of whom are still here, a couple of whom aren't. And now I'm going to switch it up and do funny, which I think is more fun anyway. And there goes Kimmy behind me.
Oh, sorry.
Someone mentioned, I think it was Dale, was it Dale or was it? Yeah, it was Dale, zooming through space on a 12-elan snowmobile. Well, I have to tell you that not so very long ago, I was doing exactly that. Now, not everybody knows what a 12-elan is, between the years 1968 and 1982, Bombardier produced a little snowmobile. It was 12 horsepower, and it was called the Elan. And it has quite a reputation here. People use them for hauling firewood and other heavy loads. And it's quite a legendary beast here. And I have one. Well, it's summer anyway. It's a 1973 model. And I've been, into outer space with it a few times. It's like Ken said, this is all true. We don't just make this stuff up. So I had to go again the other day. Now, some of you are probably aware that the Voyager space probe now is somewhere outside of Pluto, leaving our solar system, running out of batteries, and can't barely transmit to us anymore. Soon we won't hear anymore. So NASA's a bit upset. So I agreed to go out and fix it up. So anyway, this is just called Voyager, I think. And we'll run into a few well-known characters. You're all of an age where you remember David Bowie's song Space Oddity and Major Tom. And you've seen the Alien movies and the Predator movies. Okay, enough. Too much information. Well, I heard on the news not too long ago that the Voyager space probe had been on the go since the 1970s and now was beyond our own solar system and soon would be gone from radio contact. It was too far away, and the batteries were just about gone anyway, and the crowd up to NASA was all in a state. They were snotting and bawling about Voyager's fate. What a sin, said the missus, the poor little dear, out in the cold and sure no one else there, to change out the batteries. And I'd say that's a poor job of work they got done up to NASA. Well, girl, says I, that's it, I suppose. It's 12 billion miles out. As far as I know, they got nothing any good can go out that far. Change out the batteries, perhaps put on fresh tire. I suppose not, she said, with a tone in her voice, a tone now that I'd heard before once or twice. Now, missus, says I, don't be looking at me. I got to split wood and pick bake apples, see? Then up walks my buddy Eugene and his two little granddaughters, Charlotte and Lily, so cute. They were crying and sniffling and all in a state about. Poor little Voyager's lights going out. Well, sir, that was it. I said that I'd go, fix Voyager up, perhaps give it a tow, change out the batteries, restore operation, and blow in some pink fiberglass insulation. I went to the launch site because that's where I had my old 12 Elan sitting on the launch pad. The crowd down in Houston could stay home in bed. The missus in Prouston would manage instead. My Espenite cabin was bolted in place on the 12, and then for my breathing in space, a Jig's dinner dealer was put on to steam. Jig's dinner boiler was put on to steam. It's better than oxygen. Works like a dream. The missus sat down and did a few sums in her scribbler and figured out 5 or 6 runs out to Voyager, but figured the best one of all was larboard to Venus, but I should keep her close haul. I blasted off south over Paradise Sound, left Earth's atmosphere, got all settled down. I thought it would be a routine trip, eh? There was no time at all till my first big delay. First thing I knew, Major Tom came in sight, floating round his tin can and not feeling too bright. He's 40 years gone now and somewhere behind the asteroid belt. Oh, he's right low on his mind. Well, I stopped for a yarn and a quick game of crib, and I got to confess that I told him a fib, but it cheered him right up, and I think he'll be back. I boosted his tin can. She started first crack. So listen here, NASA, you owe me, I'd say, but I won't send a bill. You don't have to pay. I don't ask for much. One stroke of the pen will make us all square. Promote Tom to General. Well, I left Tom behind and I headed on out. By this time I was hungry and thirsty, no doubt. I put on the kettle and made up a lunch. But something seemed wrong, and so just on a hunch, I looked back behind me. What did I see? A Yamaha Bravo was gaining on me. That's Uncle Bert Thatcher, I said with a roar. He's after my 12 now, this 10 years or more. Well, my capelin was roasted, the kettle was boiling. I could see Uncle Bert had his old gun from Swiling. But he didn't know this wood path like I did, so I hollered 2 points to the starboard and slid just to one side of a big old black hole. It was a job just to see it. It was blacker than coal. For sure now, old Uncle Bert never saw it because he piled right into it, brought up right solid. Well, I'd say he was bogged down, no doubt, just his ski tips and top of his windshield poked out. I'll dare to give him a tow when I can. The man is some covetous of my old 12 Elan. Well, I passed along by Jupiter, skimmed over Saturn's rings. The missus called me from Parsons Centre, asked me how was things. Not bad, I suppose, says I. I had a slight delay. Don't fool around too much, she said. 'Tis land and sea today. Oh my, says I. I guess I never thought about it. And I think I got to stop again. Oh yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. You'll never guess who's out here, and into the usual fight, 'tis alien and predator, and they just got me in sight. Dave, old man, said Predator. I just knocked Alien out. No, he never, Alien said. How are you, Dave, my trout? Not bad, says I. I see you're both still at it. You ever think about counseling? Perhaps give up on the racket? Well, they looked at me kind of strange, like I was kind of stunned. Go on, Dave boy, says Alien. It's just a bit of fun. And the movie crowd, they pays the biggest kind of money every show, and then it's top EI in the off-season, you know. Well, Predator was crumped right over, doing up a shoe. Alien up and drove him with her tail. I said, uh-oh. I could see he didn't like it, and I figured I'd be leaving. Come on, you slimy nipper, he said, by the dancing raven. Well, they soon had me forgotten, so I quickly said, good day. I was somewhere out past Pluto. Kind of thought I'd lost my way. No sign of little Voyager. Time was getting tight. And all at once, the blessed little Dickens came in sight. But it was looking kind of sad, kind of beat up and neglected, and its little R2-D2 voice could barely be detected. I put on my spacewalk oilclothes and took a gulp of steam, thought of Charlotte and of Lily and the poor old NASA team. I changed out all the batteries, and I say there were a few. Figured I could come back once a year and put in new. The antennas were all buckled, so I straightened them all out, scraped and cleaned the spark plugs. They were carboned up, no doubt. I dabbed on a bit of tar where I could see a seal broken, scraped her down and painted and replaced most all the oakum. I had the little dear done up just like a stick of gum. Land and sea is in an hour, said the missus. Better run. Oh my, says I guess I better go. Voyager was fixed up now and looking nice, you know. I could see that it was happy, and it made a happy squeal. NASA's glad, the missus said. I said, tell them no big deal. I jumped back on the 12 and got my scribbler out. Figured out my course back home, south-southeast or handy bout. I jammed the throttle open, put the speed up on Wharton 9. Good enough is what I said. I should be home by supper time. Well, everything was going good until I up and spied Alien and Predator, thumbs out trying to hitch a ride. I stopped and let them come on board, because they're my buddies, right? What's for supper, Dave? Said Alien. Is land and sea tonight? Well, we got home well in time to watch Pauline come on. I had 10 tours took out for supper, now all 10 are gone. The boys, they started arm wrestling as soon as they were fit. The missus flattened both of them and made them go to bed. So now the 12 is put away till next time NASA has a failure. Alien and Predator are living in my trailer. They're playing crib most all the time and splitting wood for me. And they're hoping to get hired on part-time with UFC. There you go.
Dave Paddon, thank you very much. That was lovely. And so we're going from Dave A to Dave E. Dave Paddon on to Dave Penny. Dave.
Well, very good. I'm going to start with start with a story about this situation we're in, and I'll send it out to level 2, because here we are. Level 2 starts what? Today, I think. This is Thursday, level 2. Happy level 2, Newfoundland and Labrador. They're making personal bubbles now, ones that can adjust to meet your height requirement and the 6-foot radius. It's like a giant see-through can, 12 feet across. The government is making them and selling them at cost. Our premier launched a plan for when people got to go to town, manufactured bubbles to get inside to go around. When stay inside your bubble, he said on the internet and TV, us the viewers didn't realize he meant it literally. There was a warehouse closing up. The lights were off, the doors were shutting. The premier signed a 6-month lease, and then he streamed the ribbon cutting. The cost of all these bubbles, he said, it would be minor. Some materials were donated, and their stuff just liner. Some were made from alder trees with roofing tar and glue. Others made from tent poles. Don't know where they got those two. Some were reinforced with plastic cut-off salt beef bucket rings strung together with tie wraps, picture wire, and piece of strings. Rubber gloves were on the front, to handle carts in grocery stores, shower curtain hooks, to haul the bubble off when back indoors. Strong enough to handle high winds, nice and light to carry far, so the actual bubble was 10 mil vapor barrier. It was an unprecedented measurement, our full height and 6 feet around, but we'll get used to wearing them and not to run aground. When walking in a tight spot like in aisles in grocery stores, I hope that they can find a way to fit these bubbles through the doors. Now that we all got our bubbles, sure we can protect ourselves. We can stay 6 feet away, and if we all wear bubbles, 12. When all this is over, when we bring it to a close, what will we do with all these bubbles? Burn them in the rain, I suppose. They're making personal bubbles now, ones that can adjust to meet your height requirement and the 6 foot radius. It's like a giant see-through can, one big 12-foot ring, so we can stock up on our goods while social distancing. I have no visual cues whatsoever because of technology. So if Dale, if you could just give me
I'm giving you a thumbs up.
An audio thumbs up. Okay, grand. And I can't read any chats either. But so if there's any questions, we can get to that. Anyway, it was what? I'm going to say it was 28 degrees today. It felt like it. So, and also because of this level 2, people are going to go try their hand at camping, I would say, lifelong campers and new campers as well. So I'm going to do one about that now. It's about a camping trip that I went on with my son, who's now 13. He was 5 at the time. It rains and drizzles every day in every June that I remember. July is my favorite month for camping, but so is August and September. Come ye campers for a bit of nothing but the truth, I swear. Name a park in Newfoundland and I can tell you I was there. It began by loading blankets, sleeping bags, and last year's tent, a bag of great big 6-inch nails. I don't know where the real pegs went. Little stoves with screw-on burners, table barbecue, and last, carcinol, lighter fluids, propane, and some other gas. I didn't go alone, of course, but some might think that would be wise. I took along my son as well. This was a trip just for the boys. It was a 3-hour drive from where we were to where we had to get, and we were out to Paddy's Pond before he said, "Are we there yet?" We arrived and chose the spot, and my first job was to inspect the picture that was on the box of the screen tent I would erect. Putting up a screen tent was not taught by my father down to me. All I learned from watching him at that were swears from A to Z. It looked somewhat like the picture on the box, though, and I was pleased. Next crowd gets a new tent, though. I won't take this down when I leaves. And even if I wanted to and rolled it up like on the tag, so that great big tent will never fit back in that foolish little bag. A peaceful place with no distractions, tucked away down in the lawn, behind a breathing wall of fir trees letting in the gorgeous sun. Irritations left behind in town for someone else to fuss. Here was just the babble of a gentle brook applauding us. My son went to bed quite early, so he awoke when I still dozed. In full alert, he sat up straight. "Get up," he said. "Come on, we goes." "Go back to sleep, boy. Please," I begged him. I was feeling very tired, but no sense keeping on, I knew, because he was there and he was water. Getting up just as the sun had cast long shadows to the west, it was the best time to arise. It had to be with him, I guess. First thing was to get some breakfast, bacon, eggs, and toasted bread. But I forgot to pack the butter, so we had Fruit Loops instead. Another thing that I forgot while loading those tents in the car, sure how stunned was I, with those tanks in the car, how stunned was I that I didn't notice how light they were. Not a pinch of gas was in them. Everyone was gone right flat. And here I was with stoves and barbecues, but what's the good of that? Oh, the sun was splitting rocks and temperatures climbed up the dial. Good thing the meat was in the cooler or this evening they'd be spoiled. Puddles on the road were bubbling. Record highs by all reports. All in all, it was some day. I only wish I packed my shorts. I cracked the sunscreen on my child because he is inclined to burn. 600 SPF it added to. So I was not concerned about the big unshielded sun in full-blown force, so bright and hot. 10 coats of sunscreen blocked that off and made him slippery as a snot. I used up every bit of lotion that I had on him that day. My legs were well protected, though. I had long pants on anyway. But my face was like a partridge berry in a patch of leaves. Arms like 2 big sticks of rhubarb hanging out of t-shirt sleeves. Supper time, then we got back to the screen tent and drew the zipper. Lit a little incense coil so it would keep away the nippers. All the trouble that tent did, all the trouble that tent caused, it did a fine job keeping out the flying emmets, timber flies, wapses, bumblebees, and stouts. After supper, we lit down. After supper, we got in and lit down and drew the zipper. But skin can peel in Cuba too. And surely they have bugs in Spain. Next year on my holidays, I'm going right back here again. There you go. Thrown off by all this technology going awry. I'm going to launch right into a song now about a chip wagon. How are we doing on time there, host?
You're doing good.
We're doing good? Okay. Yep. So I'm going to do a true story, maybe true to somebody. It's about a chip wagon. The sign is true, at least. I saw this sign outside of, I think it's outside of Avondale. It's just a white sign with a chip wagon ahead. And I never did see the chip wagon. The sign's been there for quite a while, but I never see the chip wagon. So I got into wondering, whatever happened to it. So here we go. Chip wagon ahead. It was on a Saturday on the side of the highway, heading out to Fortune Bay, and Bill was getting hungry. The sign was painted white and red on some plywood, and it said in capital letters with an arrow, chip wagon straight ahead. Further up along the road where the plywood sign it showed, the chip wagon was towed away from where it always stood. It wasn't set up there no more, so we started to explore, asked some locals where it's to or how much he could get her for. He called a man named Jerry Bragg, and then he started into nagging, what's the that with that chip wagon, are you using it or what? But Jerry said he had retired, decommissioned his deep fryer, hung his hairnet up for good, but he said that Bill can buy her. Billy said they'll come in waves, 'cause that's what everybody craves. The chips and wedges and the gravy too good to pass up. He painted up some signage and bought a brand new camper van, got an apron and a name, the Newfoundland Chip Wagon Man. He sat up on the highway shoulder, pinned his sign up on a boulder, with some shields that'll hold her. Then he went to work and figured out what he should bring to the big grand opening for chips and wedges, and then maybe down the road some onion rings. Then they hired Jill and Pat. They actually knew what they were at to make the gravy, because that required all the skill, and breadcrumbs for the dressing maker. So we asked the local baker if he had some in the pantry. Begged her, I told him take her. When the loose ends were addressed, there came the big day for the test. The ketchup and the bacon bits were laid out on the stand. The finest of the ones he chose, and dropped the basket down it goes. In the shortening, oh my lard, and deep fried the potatoes. With that fryer on the go, the gentle breeze began to blow. Customers were soon in tow, the smell that drive them in. And all the traffic he was causing, now I knows that Billy wasn't some content to see them flocking by the eats or by the dozen. Highway drivers passing through, locals up for something to do, cardboard plates and napkins too stood up along the ditch. And with all that traffic swerving off the highway was unnerving for the restaurant employees at North Atlantic and the Irving. Then he thought he should expand, got another camper van and some more deep fryers, and now he could double up for sure. Two line up strung along the highway, each 150 strong, from the camper and the wagon, and that's when everything went wrong. All it took was one review, like that right out of the blue. A fella come down from Bellevue and he said, sure they're no good. The chips were raw, he said, and he found a way to get the word around. And Billy watched it all go down. Lineups now were dwindling, and he gave up on everything and untied his apron strings. He shut her down for good. He traded in his camper. Shut her down for good. Gathered all his stuff up and sold it all, but kept the van, 'cause he made his fortune as the Newfoundland chipwagon man. There you go. Chipwagon ahead. I got one more to do. So I'll fall back on one I know quite well. It's a true story. I don't have much time to introduce it. So let's just leave it at that. It's a true story that happened to me. Riding my bike here in St. John's. Fellow comes in one of these big trucks, you know, the trucks that get bigger every year as they add more things to them, and a sort of a chase ensued, and this is that tale. It's called Johnny Chrome. It was a lovely day in June up until it was nearly ruined. I was on my pedal bike and headed back for home. I heard a roar and turned to see a great big truck come down at me, and that encounter was the first time I met Johnny Chrome. I calls him Johnny Chrome because he loves the stuff, and that's what he does. His pickup truck is lined with chrome from top down to the rims, with shiny handles, hood protectors, running boards and bug deflectors, shiny chrome plates on the mirror and the fender trim. 2 big smokestacks in the pan, just like the ones in Come by Chance. Set of great big knobby tires as wide as they were round, and stickers on the sides and back, and windows tinted solid black, and extra high suspension putting 6 feet off the ground. Around the corner of Barter's Hill, he turned and put me face the grill. He saw me too, I knows he did, but still he didn't swerve. I spit and sputtered and cursed and hissed, took off and said enough of this, and rode my bike in front of him just to get on his nerves. I stood and pedaled up on me hog, and down we went across the bog, right out to Petty Harbor, then back to the overpass. We sped right on out through the ghouls. I puffed along up to Vermews and got a chance to catch my breath when he ran out of gas. I was not nervous in the least about his big Alberta beast. With all the chrome accessories, it weighed near 7 tons. The engine's very large, of course, the power of 400 horse, but he just got 6 lousy gears and I got 21. As we raced through Newfoundland, my 2 poor legs were rubber bands. The heart was pounding wildly like a teenage boy in love. My 2 feet on the pedal stem, spin at 90 RPM, up on me mountain bike, got on a Tour de Terre-Neuve. Teary-eyed, my vision blurred when we got out to Betty Verde. But I could hear him catching up, he wasn't very far. And then I saw to my right side a path about 1 meter wide. I cut in, it was just enough to clear my handlebars. As Johnny quickly cut the wheelie, stickers all began to peel. A hubcap rolling down the road, the moose rack fell apart. Oh, he cracked the strut, he bent a rod. The fancy truck came all abroad and wobbled off the road just like a rusty shopping cart. The tie rod bent, he couldn't steer, cracked off the 2 big side view mirrors, turned around and brought up in a ditch about 8 feet down. The truck so mighty and enormous, tangled up now all our sformus as I got back on me bike and rode it back to town. He pulled it out eventually and put it up on Kijiji. Sold it off reluctantly and he bawled a bucket full. He proudly brought her from Fort Mac and now she's in a yard for scrap. And Johnny beats around now on a brand new bicycle. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Kayla. Thank
Awesome.
you, boys.
Thank you. We're going to bring back Dave and Ken now, and we're going to have a little chat. So welcome back, Ken Parsons and Dave Paddon here.
And I'm going to jump in for a quick second here, Dale, and
take it away,
Dave Penny, that this black screen situation happened to somebody last night in the audience, and it was solved by leaving and coming back.
Yeah, I'm afraid to do that, though. Afraid I've not found my way back, but
okay,
I'm
so
going to try it. So
with,
if you lose me, that's what's going on.
Or
I can see
if you are fine with not seeing anybody, then we can continue with you.
Well, I could do that too. But if you're
All
telling
right.
me if you can see me, if you can hear me, let's have at it.
We can indeed. So if you're cool, then we're cool.
It makes an awkward performance even more awkward.
These are the awkward days we're living in.
Yeah.
in our technology bubbles.
That's it. Well, hopefully our technology bubbles are drawn to a close and we can see each other in real life. But
See each
anyway,
other face to
carry
face.
on.
So, boys, I haven't had supper yet. And we've talked about peas and moose and boilers and jigs and Fruit Loops and chip wagons and oh my. There is a real theme there tonight, and I think what's great about what all of you guys do is that you find the humor in everyday things, and I'm just curious, like what sparks an idea for you? Like what kind of happens and you think, oh, that might be a good story?
I'll have a crack at it. Usually I hear something now, finding a theme to write one of these things is what I find hardest. Once you think of a theme, I don't have too much trouble putting together a few verses. But and there's always something going on. All you have to do is look around you. Somebody in society is always doing something strange or ridiculous, all the more so as time goes on. So, you just observe things, I suppose. And that Voyager thing, I heard about that little spacecraft one day on the radio, and I thought, well, first thing I thought was, oh, you'll go out and fix that with the 12 land, of course. So then I had to spin it into a story. But that's sort of how it works. You just keep your ears open, and then you have to be able to put a few rhymes together.
Pretty much.
Ken, what about you? What inspires you in terms of a story?
Well, the same thing. You'll hear an odd sentence or even a fact. Something the other day I heard about seagulls, and because they eat fish, or seagulls that eat certain fish are more intelligent. So then you take that to the extreme and you've got a super intelligent seagull. So, that'll be a story in Raisin Arm about a, super genius seagull.
Extreme storytelling.
Stephen Gulling instead of Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no shortage of ideas.
Yeah, Dave Penny. So you are. Were you inspired? Is Johnny Crome a real run-in that you had?
It is.
Yeah,
it actually is, and it was, to be honest with people who are watching. I was actually walking. I had altercations several times on my bike, but in this one instance, I was actually walking. It was, a bike ride would have been funnier, but yeah, it got pretty tense. So, but anyway, other times, just like the boss said, you see something that just sparks an idea or whatever,
When Dave, when you're doing a song, the tune? This is a question from the audience. Do the tunes and words come all at once, or do you kind of have a tune in your head and the words fit to it, or what's your process like? It
does. That's the age-old question that I guess that's what I always used to wonder from songwriters, and everybody sort of that I've seen and that I say now will tell you the same thing. It could go either way. Sometimes the tune and the song will come in your head at the same time. But other times, you can have something written for the longest time and then put a tune to it. So there's no real answer. Maybe everybody approaches it differently, but for me, it could go one way or the other.
Ken, I'm curious about the magic component. This is another question from the audience as well, and that's about what informs what. Does the performance of magic inform your recitations? Do you think of the recitation and then think how you might do some sleight of hand with it?
It's more the magic first, really, because what tricks do I have that would demonstrate well, that don't take up too much space or time or props or whatever, and then it doesn't come overnight. But I mean, eventually I've got a story about eels, and that's with some rope. And then this green pea one, first time I've ever done that was tonight now. I've been working on that for about a month and a half. Without getting into it too much, it's hard to do because you don't want the magic to take over. It's got to be part of the story. So, nor do you want someone to miss some of the magic because you're getting to a part in the story. So to weave it all together, I try my best, and hopefully it works out.
That would be tangled, Ken.
Yeah, your pea story. I've got family who I think are joining us tonight. Your pea story, it's about finding kind of humor in real life stuff. My mom has a great story about going to get some chairs reupholstered when I was young, and kitchen chairs, and she got a call from the upholstery guy who said, "Mrs. Jarvis, you need to come and take a look at these chairs. There's an issue with the chairs." And she got there, and there was a rip in one of the chairs, and when he had peeled back the leatherette or whatever it was, here was all this broccoli that was stuffed inside. That was yours truly. Yeah. And so as soon as you started the peas story, I was like, yeah, that's a real story. That's a true story right there.
There you go. Well, I wrote that. That's my mom's name. Mom's watching. And I wrote that and I put mom in it. But when it comes to the family, I'm the one who doesn't like green peas, not mom. But it's just the way it is.
Yeah. I'm curious how you all got started. Like, what was your introduction to doing recitations? Dave, Paddon?
It all started in 2007, right around Christmas time. Kim and I had just moved back here in 2005. We'd been up various provinces for 20 years. We got back here and we were down at the Crow's Nest, and people were doing, you mentioned it earlier, people were doing songs and recitations. I said, geez, that would be neat. Now, I was 52 at this time. It's a bit late to be starting. But anyway, I heard an interview on CBC radio about a seabird that had somehow gotten into the cargo compartment of a commercial airliner, like the ones I used to fly. And that airplane ended up in Fort McMurray, and it flew out. And it was a tur, well, a murr. We call it a tur. And I tried to imagine the reaction of 14,000 Newfoundlanders to seeing their favorite meal flying around overhead, right? And so I wrote one verse, and Kim thought it was okay, so I wrote another one. And in 2 days, I had one called The Christmas Tur. And I said, well, I'll try this out down at the Crow's Nest. And I said, well, I guess I better memorize it. And that was 2007 and 35 recitations ago. So that's how I started at the tender age of 52.
Yeah. Dave, what about you? You came into this as a musician primarily first?
Yeah. I have an announcement to make. I'm back on stream. So, anyway, I learned something here tonight. Anyway, sorry.
Better late than never. Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, I was. I do. I play accordion and sing. I was doing that first, and I always go for the. I would always go for the, what do you call it? I used to go down to the Mon Library to get the Kenneth Peacock collection of Newfoundland songs, and usually go to the comic songs, they call it, not comic books, but like comic songs, and learn, a funny song or whatever, and was just kind of drawn to that turn of phrase type of thing. Mm-hmm. And, at the same time, just listening to, few tapes and CDs and that going around. I don't know, it's just something you get into. But as Dave mentioned, the song circle at the Crow's Nest is kind of where we sort of, wet our feet and got into it professionally.
Yeah.
I'm gonna move
Ken, and Ken, yep. you were a magician before you were a recitationist, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get started in both those?
Well, the magic, I started when I was a teenager, and I was foolish enough not to stop. So that was that. And I do kid shows. I have great fun with kid shows, but I wouldn't consider myself a great entertainer for adults in terms of magic. I enjoyed kids more, but I wanted to come up and create some scripts. So I took a course with Gary Green, the storytelling course. That will be a year ago. It was a year ago this March. So then from that, I wrote a few scripts, and after it finished, I started writing recitations. and the monthly song circle down at the Crow's Nest and the monthly story circle were great places to practice and, you know, get a few and get some response and see how it went. So, yeah. But I enjoyed listening to the two Daves and the rest of the crowd from stage to stage and Tales from Pigeon Inlet and those kind of things, and hope to be that kind of, I suppose, put out that kind of product.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about recitations is the turn of phrase. You know, that there's always there's always like one moment in a recitation where I just think, man, that is so clever. That one little rhyme, and this is your opportunity to brag, the three of you. Do you have a do you have a rhyme that you are particularly fond of?
My favorite one is back to Dave Penny and some of their swarms.
Let me see. I suppose the one I made, what would I say, most satisfied with was to rhyme. Oh my gosh, what was it? I just had it too. Oh, to rhyme Somalia. To rhyme Somalia with Keelhalia. And also, that was in that one called Not a Word of a Lie. And I'm trying to think of the verse now. A short while later, off the coast of Somalia, they ran into some pirates who said, "We'll kill ya." There you go.
Ken or Dave, do you have a favorite rhyme that you're most proud of?
Go, Ken, because
I just try to use Newfoundland words. For whatever reason, I just love the word "sove."
Yeah,
it was something that Dad would say every so often. You know, and it has to be solved, not saved or kept, or it was solved. Yeah. So Nan was drove. You know, stuff had to be solved or whatever. I enjoyed using little. Well, I won't say rarely use Newfoundland words, but stuff I grew up here and trying to fit those in rhyme. Not as creative as Dave. I would work on the Somalia one. That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's a special medal for working those two words together, I think. Yeah.
Kimmy's just here saying she loves Dave the way he uses archformance, which is a wonderful word. Word.
Yes.
How can you rhyme archformance? She said.
Yeah. In the Johnny Crome song, you know, like I just love all the place names. You know, I think, you know, maybe if you're listening from away, you don't realize how impossible this journey is.
Well, that's true.
You know, you're jumping all over kind of Newfoundland geography here, you know, and I'm just curious, you know, like this is kind of another theme in all of your work, is that sense of the local, you know, the sense of, you know, Newfoundland English, you know, like those older words that we still cling to here in Newfoundland. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, my Kim's father has been an absolute source of inspiration for me. He has all these old words. He's like a walking encyclopedia or a dictionary of Newfoundland English. And I've used it a number of times. I got to stop using it so much. But a word like clappy bag. Now, you know, how many people have heard that? I'd never heard it until I met Bob. So I've used clappy bag, and I mean, it just means a foolish person, really. And I first encountered it when I was learning how to play 120s at Kim's house, and I played the wrong card. And Bob said, "What do you play that for, you clappy bag?" So it's a marvelous word, you know.
I appreciate.
He still calls me a clappy bag.
I appreciated the use of the word emmet, the flying emmets, in one of Dave Penny's recitations. Yeah, I have a neighbor here in Clark's Beach, and he has an ongoing war with the Jesus emmets. And the mainlanders are all now going, what's a Jesus emmet?
I heard of flying emmets. I haven't heard of Jesus emmets.
Oh, well, I've heard of that. Yeah, I heard that.
And then there's wapses instead of wasps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's a wonderful word.
Yeah, waps is now there's often two several words for the same thing, you know. But and we all got them. We all got.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about we all, but you know, there's always somebody around who got all the old expressions, right? My grandmother Carter, she's passed now, but she holds, in my opinion, this is kind of off the topic, but it's not so much a word, even though she got thousands of them. But as far as expressions goes, if you gouge your arse, you got to sit on the bladders. That always comes back to me as my all-time favorite expression. But anyway,
give it to us again.
If you gouge your arse, you got to sit on the bladders.
Yeah.
So if you break it down, it's kind of a, you know, you made your bed and you got to lie in it.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
I never.
I think this is one of the reasons why recitation has been so beloved here in the province, because we really do have, you know, we have these unique words and unique kind of expressions, and you know, I think our culture wasn't always terribly literary, but words were always really important, you know. Right. And people were recognized as being able to kind of have a quick turn of phrase, you know, that sense of humor, that sense of kind of quirky delight with language, I think has always been really important. Someone asked a question in the chat about writing the story. Like, do you draft the stories first? Do you write them out? Do you worry about the rhymes first, or do you kind of have a flow of story and then fit the rhymes in? Ken, when you're writing something, what's your writing process like?
Oh, rhymes all the time. It won't go on the paper unless it rhymes. It might not be a great rhyme. I might come back and fix it after, but it's got to go. It's got to rhyme to go on the paper. Yeah, sure. Yep. Start with the first sentence, get the second one to rhyme, carry on.
And then do you do a lot of editing, or do they kind of come out fully formed? Like,
I would say editing. The story comes out, but you might replace something that makes it clearer, funnier, more exact. You know, a better rhyme or a better sentence, which requires a different ending and a different rhyme. But from what I understand, it helps me anyway. I'll put it on paper as quick as I can before I lose the idea, and come back after and edit.
Yeah, sometimes you wake up in the middle of the night and you just better write that down because you won't know it in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they go all over the place, like that Voyager one. That I think the first part of it I wrote was the thing between Alien and Predator, right? So okay. That was there first, and then why would I go out and meet up with them? Well, I had to go out and fix the Voyager space probe, right? So they sort of danced around a bit, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There's a question from Clara Dugas in the audience about all this. She says all this talk about Newfoundland rich expressions makes me wonder. Makes me wonder if a person like me, her from away, could do well in Gary's recitation course. And I'm just gonna I know Clara, and you know I think I use this quote all the time. And many of you will know Robert Chafe, great Newfoundland playwright. You know, and he wrote the play about Nurse Myra Bennett. And I remember him saying in an interview once, the more local you make your story, the more universal it becomes.
Wow,
the more specific you can make it, you know, the more people are like, oh yeah, that's the truth in the story. You know, like that. I didn't have a Nurse Myra Bennett, but I had, you know, something like that. I had a Nan Blunden, or Johnny Crome is my neighbor. You know, like you know, I think for Clara, I think we all come from a place that has a specificity to it, you know, and I think part of what we've seen tonight is that people have just taken their stories and told their stories. So I think you could certainly do it anywhere else. I think, yeah.
Gary runs a really good course, and I would encourage anybody who's interested in this stuff to take his course.
Now, Dave, you've traveled in your time? You went off and performed recitations in Ireland, didn't you?
Yes, that was a few years ago now. Yeah.
Yeah. And now so what was it like when you present kind of a Newfoundland or Labrador story in Ireland? What was the response?
Well, they were very kind. It was at a festival of humorous verse called the Bard of Armagh, and I became a honorary Bard of Armagh, but most of it was local flavored. I was in it with 16 other people, and I was the sort of exotic specimen. And they didn't get it all, but you don't have to, right? And
Yeah.
I didn't get all their stuff, but I just roared with laughter because I could get just enough of it that I knew what they were talking about. And what a talented bunch. And I was over in Edinburgh doing a story there as well. And that was just wonderful too. They actually have a dedicated storytelling center in the middle of the Golden Mile, I think it's called, in Edinburgh. And I told my stuff, and there were other people from different places told their stuff. And it's kind of universal. You don't have to get all the references. You get the flavor.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been lucky to go, and I think the best, for me personally, the best storytelling experience I've ever had was I got to go to Orkney, and I remember just doing a night with a storyteller from Orkney, Tom Muir, and a storyteller from the Shetland Islands. And they just told these incredibly local stories, and it was just remarkable to be able to hear those people tell, very personal, very local stories. And it is kind of magical. And I don't get all the references, but yeah, there is that kind of, they know where they are and they know where they come from, which is one of the things that I love about recitations here.
Can I ask Dave a question now?
Yeah.
Sure. I find sometimes I have an idea and I'll write. A good example is one. My wife told me the story about her dad finding a hockey puck in the snow on a pond. But as I started to write, it eventually became about a food fight with people throwing squid and caitlin at each other. So what I wanted to do and where the story took me are two different things. So I don't know if that happens too, if the other Daves have the same experience.
Oh, they sort of migrate all over the place sometimes. I started with the second one I ever wrote. I had an idea what I was going to write, and by the time it was done, it bore no resemblance to what I started out with. Yeah. But you just, if your imagination says we're going in this direction, then you just better go, all right? Yeah. Don't try and fight it.
It helps.
And Dale, I saw Tom Muir in Edinburgh too, and I met him there. And he's done a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It helps to have somebody to bounce your ideas off of. Or not so much your ideas, but your semi-finished product, or when you think you're done. It's always good to have one or two or a few people that you can bounce it off of, and then because sometimes you might think it's a straightforward piece, but it's not, or it's always good to get some feedback and not be afraid to get it,
Yeah.
And then I know I got one called Gooby's Worm Thief, and I pretty much redid the whole thing after Harry Ingram from stage to stage with Dave and Dave and I and Hubert Fury and Harry Ingram. And Harry said, it was great, but it's hard to follow. I pretty much had to rewrite the whole thing. So that goes back to the editing question that Clara asked ages back. Maybe I'm gone off topic. I was fooling around with the chat, so sorry if I did.
Well, while we're talking about the kind of the editing and crafting stuff, maybe I'll get Kaylee to come back and just give us a little bit. You want to give another plug for the workshop that's coming up?
Well, I would be delighted to give another plug, but I also have to tell you that those swift individuals in the session tonight have filled it up. It is now full, our July session. That is a maximum of 10 people, and we're at 10. So I will tell you about the course. I will encourage you to get on the wait list just in case, and especially get on the wait list because we will run it again if we have enough interest. So this is Story in Verse, a crash course in recitation writing with Gary Green. who is a longtime storyteller, much like these fine fellows we have this evening, and works with them all often. And, Gary travels all over the place telling stories, was most recently at the Scottish International Storytelling Festival. This is just a plug for Gary Green. But Gary's course will be 4 consecutive nights. This session is July 7th through the 28th, Tuesday evenings, 7:30 to 8:30 Newfoundland time on Zoom. And so it's a combination of sort of instruction and a little bit of sort of history and background, and then exercises. And of course, you as participants will go away and do your recitation homework and then come back next week for class. And the cost of the class is $55. As I said, we filled up as this session was going on with our 10 participants. They may drop out. You never know. Get on the wait list. If there's enough people on the wait list, we'll absolutely run it again. And you can get the information for that on Facebook at St. John's Storytelling Festival page, or you can head to our website, which is storytellingstjohns.ca. And I'll put that information in the chat so that it's visible for everybody. But yeah, that's the pitch about the
Back downstairs, please.
You guys are snapping it up.
That's great. So I'll just take this opportunity to thank our 3 storytellers tonight, Ken and the Daves, for sharing their stories with us tonight. Give them a virtual round of applause. Thank you again to Kaylee for all the work that they've been doing. And I just wanted to finish off. This is my shameless plug for me. I have a new book, in this weird age of COVID-19, the book came out as an ebook, but it's coming out in print format on August 5th. And this is one for Dave Penny because I love the Johnny Crome recitation so much. And in the book is called On This Day, 365 Tales of History, Mystery, and More. And there's a different story for each day of the year, a different little historical tidbit. And so this one is from May 26th, from 1869, when it was the very first velocipede ever ridden in public in Newfoundland, the precursor to the modern bicycle. And people were very kind of uncertain about this new technology, and they weren't really certain if it was a safe thing. There were certainly no dedicated bike lanes in St. John's in 1869.
It was somebody from downtown, wasn't it?
So this gentleman, Mr. Earl, he rode his bicycle to Topsail and back, and I can't imagine the road was very well paved in those days. And so a few days later, one of the local papers printed this little cautionary tale, which was apparently a parody of a ballad that was popular at the time, and it was just called The Velocipede. And it goes like this. Lord Lovell he stood by the garden gate with his shining velocipede, and whispered farewell to his Lady Belle, who wished for his lordship good speed, who wished for his lordship good speed. When will you be back, Lord Lovell, she said, but he gave her question no heed, placed his feet in the stirrups and galloped away on his famous velocipede, peed on his famous velocipede. Then Lady Belle cried in frantic alarm, what a monster my lord is indeed, to ride away thus from his loving young wife on that horrid velocipede, peed on that horrid velocipede. Lord Lovell returned, broken-hearted and sore, broken-armed, and alas, broken-kneed, for he struck on a post, nearly gave up the ghost, and smashed his velocipede, peed, and smashed his velocipede. Remember the fate Lord Lovell hath met, let this be your warning and creed. Stay at home with your wife for the rest of your life, and beware of the velocipede, peed, beware of the velocipede. From 1889, St. John's.
Wow, deadly.
So, thank you all for joining us tonight. Thanks for all of you who have joined us from near and far. And we hope to see you at a future storytelling event. And thank you again to Ken and Dave.
There you go. Grand.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.